What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Sigma Cigar channel. In this video, we are going to cover everything you need to know to cut your cigar perfectly every time. We're going to go over the different types of cutters available to cut your cigars, and we're going to talk about the different shapes of cigars and a few tricks of the trades that you're going to definitely need to know. So let's jump right in. When it comes to cutting cigars, it's like a fine art, and how you choose to approach this. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off by looking at the three main types of cigar cutters. So first up, you have your straight cut or a guillotine cut. Now with the straight cut, it's just a double blade guillotine. You can see it right there. It's two blades coming together and creating a perfect straight cut. It's pretty straightforward. Straight cutters, however, they do come in different shapes and sizes. I have a few different ones here. You can see they're all just straight flat blades, but they kind of come in different functionality. So that's just the first main cutter, straight cut. Now next up you have what's called a V cut, and a V cut is it's a blade that's shaped like a V, and when you cut the cigar with the V cut, you create this wedge opening. So it's very unique in that way. What I like about the V cut is it prevents your lips from touching the inner filler of the tobacco. The third type of cutter is a punch cut. Now if you've ever used like a hole puncher or something like that, it looks just like that, and this is good for making a more concentrated draw. You get a perfect circle every time. Okay, so before we cut a cigar, let's look at the most common shapes of the end caps of cigars and see how you're going to handle cutting each one. Cigars come in many different shapes and sizes, and it can be overwhelming trying to grasp all of that at once. But essentially you have two main types of end caps, which is the head of the cigar where you're going to cut. So you have your parejo and you have your figuado, which basically one is a more flat rounded cap that you expect. The other is a torpedo shaped head, and each one is going to have a different approach with how you cut it. Now, first up is your rounded end cap. Now, this is suitable for any of the three cutters we already mentioned. You can use a straight cut on it, a V cut, or even a punch cut. So rounded caps have an end cap which holds the cigar in place. Now, it can have one end cap, and for more high quality cigars, you'll even have up to 3 end caps. And this end cap holds the cigar together. It's glued on there, and it keeps it from unraveling on you. And the other cool part is you can use it as a guide when you go to cut, which we're going to get into later on in this video. Next, you got your torpedo cut. Now with the torpedo cut, you can use your straight cut or you can use a V cut. What you do not want to do is try to use a punch cut on the torpedo, because it's just not going to work. And if you try to use a punch cut on that, you're most likely just going to damage the whole cigar. Just not going to work. Just like rounded cigars, torpedo cigars have 1 to 3 end caps glued to the end to help keep it together and keep that structure. What I like about torpedo cigars is there's a method to cutting them where you can get the perfect draw that is just right for you every time, and I'm going to explain exactly how to do that in just a minute. All right, now let's start cutting these cigars, and we're going to go over the technique on how to cut each different shape of cigar. So let's start off with the rounded end cap cigars now. Now the first thing you want to do is look for those end caps and where they're glued on, and look at those lines, whether you have 1 end cap or 2 or 3, and use those as a guide. Now, a big problem, a mistake that I see sometimes is guys go and chop off a big chunk of that cigar, and that is absolutely the wrong way to cut the end. So the first rule of thumb is do not go past those end caps, because if you do, you're more likely to have the cigar unravel on you and you won't even be able to smoke it. But if you stay within those lines, the cigar will stay in place and you'll be able to enjoy it all the way through. Ideally, what you would want to do is cut off literally just the first end cap. So you would have just a slither of the end cap taken off, about a dime size amount. And when you cut, I want you to pay attention to how much tobacco you're actually cutting out too. So when you have a good clean cut, you have very minimal tobacco from that filler coming out with your end cap. So if you're cutting and you're getting a bunch of tobacco spilling out, you're cutting way too far. Now with a V cut, you want to follow those same guidelines as with a straight cut, which is basically do not go past those end caps. And when you go to cut, just go to slice right through nice and swiftly. And last, we have the punch cut. Now, newbies love a punch cut. I know when I first started out, I loved using a punch cut just so I can get a concentrated draw. I felt like the draw from cigars was very loose at first. Now, with a punch cut, you got to be extra careful not to crack or break the wrapper at the end cap. Everything is so delicate right there. So when you go to use a punch cut, my best tip for you is to make sure you hold the cigar still and don't twist it. Take the end cap, twist that into the cigar. Now you have to be, absolutely like perfect with this. Otherwise, bend the punch or something could just easily go out of alignment, and then you end up cracking the wrapper, which would just basically ruin your whole experience. Now let's go over the technique for cutting torpedo shaped cigars. All right. So what I like about torpedo cigars that I mentioned earlier is that you can kind of get a custom draw out of it. The first thing you want to do is, of course, look for that end cap line and do not go past that. But what you do is you cut just a little bit off at a time, and then you test the draw. And if the draw is still a little too tight, well, then you can just cut off another like millimeter or two. And you can keep doing this until you get that draw just right. Or of course, you reach that line that you don't want to go past. With the V-cut, there really isn't much else you can do except just line it up and just slice. All right, just another quick tip for you guys, so how do you get the perfect draw, because sometimes you get a cigar that's too loose, sometimes you get a cigar that's just too tight of a draw. So how can you go about this in a way that you always, get something to your liking? Well, if you want to get that perfect draw, here's what I suggest you do. First, start out with a punch cut and give the draw test. Still a little too tight, then you can switch to a straight cut to get maximum airflow as you can out of that cigar. Also, with torpedo shaped cigars, you can do this as well. Just use a V cut. And if the V cut is not working out for you, then you can just go ahead and use a straight cut, and that'll open it up even more. However, there's one way, which is pretty badass if I do say so myself. That's what's called the crown cut. So you start off with a V cut, and then you put another V cut opposite to the first one. So perpendicular to the first cut. And now you have this X shape from the top that looks like a crown. And it's pretty unique. And of course, the added benefit of looking cool. And what I love about the cigar world is you can do whatever you want to do. If you like it, then so be it. It's all about your enjoyment. So make sure you experiment with all the different cutters and the different techniques to find what gives you the maximum enjoyment out of your cigars. And if you're new to the cigar world and trying to figure out what cigars to start with, make sure you check out this last video where I talked about how to choose your first cigar. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. And if you made it this far in the video, leave a comment below and tell me what's your go-to cutter every time. What's your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. See you guys in the next video. Peace.